Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a big interview I've been looking forward to for months. I personally reached out to this varsity human, not only because of the athletic skill set, but because of the incredible leap in self-belief that she took in herself to really chase the dream. But before we get into that, I got to give a little love to our sponsors that show up for us big. Lux Neuro offering you neurofeedback and counseling where your heart and mind align. For more information about what neurofeedback can do for you, listen to the neurofeedback stories of transformation in the middle of this podcast. Neurofeedback effectively treats everything from insomnia, anxiety, depression, trauma, ADHD, and much more. Optimize your brain today. And we got to give some love to Declan James Watches, showing up strong. My fellow CrossFitter, they are veteran-owned, beautifully handmade watches in Colorado. 10% of all sales go back to the Navy SEAL Foundation, so go check them out. Shout out to Brian Doherty. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome the Sunny Choi to Turmeric and Tequila. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. You have a pretty good, bio right now. I'm just going to give the quick 10,000 foot view. And, as you know, in Turmeric and Tequila, if you listen, we're going to lean into the mission or the human behind the mission and unpack the details. But the Sunny Choi was born November 10th, 1988. She's an American breakdancer who competed in the inaugural break dancing competition at the 2024 Summer Olympics. She previously performed as a youth gymnast and was the director of Estée Lauder before leaving to pursue breaking full time. She participated in the 2022 World Games in the dance sport competition, where she won the silver medal in the B Girls event. In 2023, she won her first gold medal for breaking ever given in the Pan American Games. Because of that, she became the first American woman to qualify for the Olympics, breaking, and finished 12th at the 2024 Paris Olympics. And we have so much to unpack. Sunny, was all that correct?
I think the title is the only one that was just slightly incorrect. I was Director of Global Creative Operations at Estée Lauder, but I wasn't
there we go.
at Estée Lauder.
All right, let's get it right, because Estée Lauder, I know they're listening right now, so I'm just kidding. But one day. Yes, I got this off of, I can't remember on the internet, but I'm like, I bet this is in between. The cool thing is, when I was looking up at all your different bios, this human has had coverage in Time Magazine, on the Today Show. Like, not only are you notable in doing things, but the world is leaning in and they care. And that's not always the case for women's sports. So as an athlete, a current athlete, former D1 lacrosse player, this is huge for all of us. Before we even get to that, though, I always like to talk about, our humans or our guests as a young person. So give me like the quick 411 on young Sunny.
Well, young Sunny grew up born in Cookville, Tennessee. I was raised in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was like hooked on gymnastics. I watched the 92 Olympic Games, when I was 3. And I apparently bothered my mom for an entire month straight to put me in gymnastics because I wanted to win a gold medal at the Olympics. And so like she actually saved one of my pictures, because all the pictures I drew as a kid was me as some sort of athlete with a medal at the games, or maybe not with the medal on, but like the Olympic rings would be in the corner of the pictures. And so I was like super obsessed in the gym all the time growing up. We decided pretty young not to pursue that pathway, just to kind of go more traditional, like go to regular schooling and then, go to college and all of that. So I think I was around 12 when we decided to forego the Olympic pathway and then just go traditional gymnastics, do it at a high level, potentially get a college scholarship, and then, and beyond. That didn't really work out because I blew out my knee in high school and I ended up quitting. I was outside of the gym. I was a good student. I got great, good grades. Not that I wasn't kind of struggling with stuff on the side personally, but, on the outside, like everything was great. And I applied to Penn. So I got into Penn, Wharton School for Business.
Nice.
Did 4 years there, finished. Throughout that whole time, though, I think I always knew that I wanted to do something a little more untraditional. I took a fashion class in high school and I loved it. I ended up making my prom dress. And then in college, I actually ended up taking a bunch of art classes and almost switched until I realized how expensive it would be to do an extra year.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen. So I think I was always looking for something. And so it kind of turns out I stumbled into breaking in college, fell in love with it. At that point, I wasn't doing gymnastics, but I missed being upside down. And so, I just kind of stuck with it. And then lo and behold, I ended up fulfilling my childhood dream anyways, going to the Olympics for breaking instead of gymnastics.
That is so wild. And if you're listening, we're going to do this in 2 parts. So this part 1, we're going to talk about Sunny's Olympic experience getting there, because that's a whole conversation itself. And then on part 2, we're going to talk about specifically, because she comes from the business world, how she's now monetizing her name, image, likeness, skill set as a businesswoman, as a business athlete in 2024, because I really want to have concentrated time on that, because I know we have so many young people questioning a better way earlier than we did and navigating that space. And it's a whole skill set, and it's doable now more than ever. So tune into part 2. We'll lean into that. For right now, I really want to get into this, how you, because it's so wild. The reason I ask about, your young self, what's going on, because the stars are aligning early, and like, it's kind of written out there early. So, you want to go to the Olympics, and you've got this in game. It's the in between that we have to just ride the wave and figure out, like, how does this make sense? I was a D1 athlete. I was for sure we were going to win a championship, and then I was going to play in the Olympics or lacrosse. It wasn't there yet. I was even writing letters to the Olympics to get them. Long story short, I switched my major from business to communication just to accommodate my lacrosse schedule. And fast forward 20 years, communication, I'm on the mic, like, never saw this as it being a thing. So it's funny that it takes you on this windy road. When you graduated college and you started to get into the business world, how did you maintain breaking, if you found it there, like, while you were doing all the professional adult things?
Truthfully, it was really challenging. I'm one of those people that just goes, and then kind of burns out. And so not that, and that's something that I'm working on personally now, but that allowed me to, work a long work day, go home, change really quick, go to practice all evening, get home, eat a meal, go to bed, and do it all over again. I would kind of go through cycles where sometimes I'd be practicing a little bit less, like only like 3-4 times a week. And then there were times where I was practicing 7 times a week. And then, more recently, closer to when I actually ended up quitting corporate and then breaking full time, I was waking up early to go train with my coach in the gym, and then going to work and then practicing in the evenings. And that was getting, really overwhelming. So it was really challenging. I think to be able to compete at a really high level and maintain a corporate job, it requires a sacrifice, and a sacrifice that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for everybody, because it really takes a hit on your mental health. And I think that was something that I didn't realize earlier on that ended up catching up with me later. So I was able to do it, but there was definitely a cost to it.
Absolutely. I don't know if you're familiar with CrossFit. I saw some of your workout videos. I'm like, I feel like she's doing some version of CrossFit with the lifting. I don't know how you feel about that, but competed in CrossFit forever and was trying to qualify as an individual. Actually did in, oh God, I don't know, 2010, I want to say. And then went my spot to be on the team. Long story short, it's such a myopic space to be in, because you're worried about your sleep. You're worried about what you're doing, plus a full-time job. And I have 3 dogs and like all the things happening. You really have to live in this solo world. What were some of the things you did to manage your mental health, to just to balance those 2 worlds?
Back then I wasn't doing very much.
Yeah.
And I was just like rolling with the punches and not understanding what was happening and why. I was kind of in these like long, cyclical like cycles of like low to moderate level depression on and off, and not understanding like why that was happening. It wasn't until at this point, it's probably been about like 7 or 8 years when I really started to like question and really started to dig and try to put the puzzle pieces together, figure out, what about my childhood may have helped me or may have kind of caused these conditioned behaviors in myself, and why I was such a perfectionist, and why I felt the need to always be productive, and why I felt the need I needed to earn rest. And so there's all these things that like I slowly started unpacking over the years. And so it's not until more recently that I'm really being more conscientious of my mental health as I move forward. But it's been a really, really long journey to get to where I am today.
I hear that. Well, this is still pretty new conversation. I was in college in like 99 to 2004. I tore my ACL my sophomore year and had to redo everything, go in a couple times and clean it out, all the fun stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
no conversation around mental health, and had full like identity crisis. If I wasn't a lacrosse player, who am I? So we didn't know all those things. And, again, fast forward 20 years, we've got meditation and coaching and therapy is more socially acceptable. What were some of the strategies that you were first introduced to, and what have you maintained now that really works for you?
So one of the things that helps me now is I take these like 10-second breaks in between tasks. And I'd actually say, honestly, recently I've been doing it a little bit less, but recently I haven't been as busy. So I don't feel like it's quite as necessary. But because I have a habit of just like rolling from one task to the next and like snowballing through the day. And then at the end of the day, I'm just like, oh my gosh, what happened? I'm exhausted and I have nothing left. In between every single task, I just take a 10-second micro break, basically. And so you just sit there, stop whatever you're doing, and use that 10 seconds to take a deep breath, check in with yourself to kind of check like where your energy levels are, social, physical, whatever kind of energy you want to check in on. And then at that point, you can decide what you need to do next, whether it's something that's going to refuel you, or at least be conscientious of going into that next task with like where your levels are. And when I started doing that, I started realizing how early in the day that I was actually running out, and then just rolling through anyway. And then, by the end of the day, just being so shot, like I just can't do anything. And then, when you do that consistently, it catches up, and then you end up digging a hole, and you have to dig out of it. So that's a really big one that's been super helpful. But I would say that's probably one of the most concrete ones that I do each day. I think most of the work has really been about like restructuring the way that I think and kind of unpacking, and then like almost like re-intellectualizing the way that I see the world to help me kind of break these patterns of behavior that I've had for so long.
Absolutely. It's so, because again, we're hardwired as a young person, and some of that stuff is really hard, no pun intended, but to break up. Like you have to, really get in there. And number one's awareness. And like, I love that 10-second break idea. I'll definitely work that in, of just something quick, not overwhelming, just to check in. And then I think once you're aware, then you start to see what's going on. I've certainly dabbled in adrenal fatigue and whatnot. And then if you're an athlete and you can't train even at like 80%, it's almost counterproductive. So you've got to find a way. And then you don't have a good practice or a good competition. So that whoops on your mental health. And like, it really does snowball. And when you're an individual athlete, it's just you. Like there's no one else to pass the ball to. Like it's 100% you. So what was like the breaking point when you're like, okay, I think I'm good at breakdancing. I think this can be a thing. You have an extraordinary position at Estée Lauder. That's no joke, especially in New York City. Like it's not for the faint of heart. I'm a Colorado kid, but I have East Coast energy. I play lacrosse at East, and so all my friends are East Coast, and people are like, are you from New York? I'm like, no, I just talk fast. But it's a thing. It's a whole different energy out there. What was like literally the point where you're like, okay, that's it. I'm taking the leap and I'm doing this full time?
It actually took me a really long time to come to that decision. I would say it was at least a 6-month process from when they first announced it to when I actually decided to quit. And it was just like hitting this wall over and over and over again and being like, well, I feel like I'm going to regret this if I don't do it. But also, I don't think I'm ready to give up everything. It felt like I had worked my whole life to get to that corporate job that I had at that point. I'd really fought hard for it. And, as we all do in our jobs, we work long hours, and I was constantly sacrificing a lot there to be able to, show up and get promoted and get to where I was. So to throw all that away, and with the job, the other things attached, the financial stability, the dreams of having a home and a family and all of that, to put all that aside, to break full time and pursue this childhood dream that, it's a childhood dream, but like, what is that really going to bring me? I couldn't wrap my head around it. And for months, I was in this like limbo, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But in the back of my head, I knew what I needed to do. I just didn't feel ready to pull the plug. I remember I was sitting in the car one day and I was just like crying my eyes out. And I was like, what is stopping me from doing this? Clearly, I really want to do it, because I would have stopped thinking about this a long time ago, What is it? And I realized that, all of this superficial stuff that I was putting in front of me is like the reasons why I didn't want to quit my job, because I wanted to buy a house and it's expensive in New York, because I needed to have a family by whatever age that people, think that you should have a family, and all of these things. It's like all that can be put aside for a couple of years. None of that. I'm not saying no to any of it. I'm just delaying it. So like, what is it really? And I realized that it was just a really deep rooted fear of failure. I'd been a perfectionist my whole entire life. I'd kind of set up this life to look so perfect on the outside because I was so scared of failing. And this was a big dream. And with big dreams comes, I don't want to think about it as failure, but at that time it felt like could come big failure, and a very public one at that. And so, kind of coming to terms with like, it was just me standing in my own way and my own fear of failure. And then, just kind of saying, well, that's not really a good enough reason. So decided to go for it. And then at that point, it still actually took me more than 6 months to quit my job because I wanted to kind of set myself up financially, knowing we were going to have to pay for our flights and accommodations and all this to qualify to the games. And so I did end up staying in the job. So it was like a year and a half long process in total. But, I had a plan in place at least, and I knew I was going to quit. And so at that point, like it was like light at the end of the tunnel. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Wow. And how did like family, friends, people around you? Because breakdancing isn't like, we're not going to the NBA where you're making a bunch of money. Like it's like women's lacrosse. Like no one really knows it yet, and now it's exploded. If you know, you know. But it's. This is a leap of faith. Like, what did family and friends, all like your humans that aren't living the vision of the dream, feel about this leap?
So I had been fortunate enough to have gotten some, media coverage, and then, with events like the World Games, a little bit more exposure to the world that way. And my parents had seen that and seen some of the other things that were kind of flying around. I was on NPR for a piece, and so that was like exciting for my dad who listens to NPR. So I think that was all like helpful in the transition for my parents, because it wasn't like it came completely out of the blue. It was like there was a lead up, and it was a good lead up, at least in their eyes. That made it easier for them. But also, I feel like people who know me and know my personality, I'm one of those that's just, I'm a go-getter and make sure I get things done. And I think a lot of people are like, whatever you do, you're gonna make it work. So I'm not really concerned about you. And everybody was actually very, very supportive of this decision. The word decision is fairly difficult they were really supportive of the decision. Truth be told, I was extremely nervous to tell my mom on the phone that I was going to quit my job. And she was actually also, she did go quiet for a little bit, which scared me, but she was super, super supportive too. And then, ever since then, this whole journey, I've just had so much like love and support along the way. So I feel really, really lucky to have had that, because I don't know that everyone else got that opportunity, because like you said, breaking's not known. This was the first time, right now, one and done in the Olympics. So, we really didn't know what was going to happen and how it was going to go.
Yeah. I've done a similar process, wasn't on that level stage, but just kind of chasing the dream. The funny thing I found in my process, there was a lot of support, and I kind of like you, they're like, well, we know you and you're going to figure out whatever it is. And we're not going to tell you no, because you're going to do it anyways. And I got support, and tell me if this happened with you, where people are like, yeah, you should do it. I wish I did something like that. Or I've always had this dream. I wanted to do it. So I almost felt like people were kind of like living vicariously through me a little bit, and wondering like, man, look what she's doing. Like, did you get any of that at all? Or did you feel any of that?
I did. And it was actually really amazing. A lot of people reached out to me to be like, hey, this is so inspirational, for you to have worked so long, and then at your age to pivot entirely. I was one of the older Olympians in our sport, but I think also in general, being mid-30s. And for that to be the time where I chose to make like a huge career jump, that's also kind of a bit later. But even outside of that storyline, there were also people who were saying like, it's amazing to see Asian women in sport as well, because there's not that many. And especially kind of in the Korean communities, I feel like there's even less. And so there were also women younger, girls and women who looked like me that were like, I see so few Asian women in sports. So this is also really amazing to see, because you had that same kind of pressure to do everything traditionally, and then you broke out of that, and here you are. So it was really inspiring, and honestly helped to fuel me along the way, especially on those lows, on the days where you wake up and you don't want to go to the gym. You definitely don't want to go dance. It was just really helpful sometimes to see those messages.
Oh, I love that so much. It is. It's like a tangible energy when people believe in
Mm-hmm.
Turmeric and Tequila. We talk about mental health and community because one impacts the other, and you got to keep the right people around you. Because even if you're a strong, grounded human and you're good about your mental practice, you always need your people, whatever it is. Like you need them to come through on the right days at the right time, and it really does take a village to make this work. Do you think that because the corporate world, especially Estée Lauder, these big companies in New York City, there is pressure all the time. Like and everybody's smart, everybody's talented. It's harder for a woman. It's harder for a woman of color. Like all those things are real. Do you feel like that pressure, like almost prepared you to take on the pressure of now blazing trail and like really building a path for breaking, and now in the Olympic space, and now you're conscious and responsible for representation? Like, do you think that helped the transition and the representation piece?
I think there were very tangible skills that I got from working in corporate that has helped me to kind of be an ambassador for breaking and for the community on this journey. And I think one of the big ones is actually public speaking.
Okay.
In corporate, you're just like talking in front of huge groups of people all the time and winging it. And it's not that different from talking to the media and kind of summing up a story and being able to tell it in a way that somebody else can understand and relate. Right. So in that way, I think I was really lucky and got kind of a head start, or, a leg up on some other people in that world. And I think that's also why a lot of the media picked up on me, because they saw, oh, this woman can speak and she's relatively well spoken. So, we can speak to her about this. And so I got a lot of opportunities to talk about the community, which was really amazing. And I'm super grateful for that. Obviously there's a bunch of other skills, time management, people skills, all of that kind of came from corporate. But I feel like a lot of the skills are also were innate skills that were just developed in the corporate world. So like me being a perfectionist and always having a high standard for myself throughout life, that never changed in corporate. And then that continued on in this world. And truthfully, this Olympic journey has been about letting go of that and allowing myself to just be and accepting myself for who I am today. And that's why I was able to have so much fun at the games and not worry about my placement. I actually didn't know I was 12th. This is the first time I'm hearing that. And like when you said it didn't even faze me. I was like, okay, yeah, great. Because I didn't care how I did that day in terms of my ranking. I just wanted to go out there and have fun and show the world who I was. And I feel like I did that. But this journey was really about finding my voice, finding myself, and breaking past that perfectionism and allowing myself to exist and just be happy. But these are all skills, again, going back to corporate, that like I really honed in corporate, because perfectionism is great in the corporate world. And then kind of brought into breaking, and then I had to like restructure. And so there was a lot that came from corporate that helped me on the journey for sure.
Yeah. Well, you say, the Olympics, I feel like everybody's 0 years old out there. They're, literally 14. It's wild how it's getting younger and younger. And as you get older, you really understand that regardless of what time you think things should happen, it happens on time, whether it's maturity or your body needs to grow or your mind needs to be there. Things really do happen on time. And for mission driven type A humans, that's not always, good and easy for us to digest. However, it really is what it needs to be. So even though you say, I was an older athlete or I did this later, it sounds like it was right on time for you to get the best experience possible, not only in the Olympics, but to be a leader in the community, to be a voice in the community, to be a voice on, these major publications. Like there was many facets to this, opportunity that I think were more impactful than even the competition.
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying earlier, there's no way I could have lined up those pieces in my head earlier and understood how it was all going to work together. There were all these disparate moments in my life where I was picking up skills, learning things, meeting people, all of that. And then it all kind of just, growing mentally, working through myself and my problems and my issues. All of that kind of came to a head actually at the Olympics. And it felt like, oh, this is my time. This is perfect. I don't think I would have been ready to work through some of the mental hurdles that I had worked through at that time had it been, 8, 12, 16 years ago. And I think my experience would have been very different. Not that it would have been like worse, just very, very different. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything. The experience was just really amazing.
That's incredible. And for all those things you're talking about, a marriage, a partner, a family, you want all this stuff before because you want to be the best parent you can be. You want to be the best partner you can be. Like all this stuff, like you need before. So I don't know. It's wild that our society kind of pins some of these really heavy decisions. Do it at, in your 20s and this and that. It's like, well, wait a second. Do you remember your 20-year-old self? Like maybe we take some time. Let's take some time for some self growth, and then let's, have children and lead the world and do all this stuff. But that's a whole other podcast. Why don't you break down for us like the Olympic, like the sports side of breaking? I thought they did, as a business person that's done partnerships and sponsors and blah, blah, blah. I thought they did an extraordinary job with the setup, the way the music was laid out. But I want to get an opinion for someone that was in it and living it. Like, tell me what you thought about the whole thing.
It felt like the biggest and most exciting jam I think I've ever been to.
Okay.
So they actually did a really good job of keeping it pretty true to the way our events are run in general. I mean, obviously there are some deviations and some changes there. I love the fact that they got clearance to a lot of our breaks and music that we typically listen to, because some of the events they actually don't. And we're dancing only to the music that the DJs produce, and so it sounds very like electronic, as opposed to having like some of the soul and some of the lyrics that you got at the Olympics. And so that was actually one really big and great change that they made at the games that you may not see at some of the other big events for breaking. The stage size was pretty good. I liked the setup and the vibe, and the energy was like all really well contained in this space, so you really felt it. And so that was super amazing. And so overall, I think they did a really good job in terms of like setting up the event. And then the style of the event in terms of like the way the competition runs, we've been doing that for several years, actually, in the lead up to the Olympics. Most of the qualifying events were like that. So we were very familiar with it. I think for somebody coming in and not knowing anything, it's a little bit challenging to grasp. But for us, it was, very kind of run of the mill. This is what we're used to. We're ready for it. So overall, I thought it was done, really well.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because I mean, it comes from hip hop, and there's a lot of like society and racial and cultural things that come through, like what made breaking what it is. And I was so interested to see, like, how do you quote unquote commercialize this? Like, how do you hit the authenticity of what it is and what it represents, and then put it on this mainstream scale? So I was just curious to think like what the dancers thought and what you guys thought. And it seemed like the community, like you guys all together, everybody seemed very supportive and just like a good group. Was that the genuine vibe?
Yeah, I would say generally the breaking community has been really supportive of this movement, and the added exposure, awareness, and like kind of the influx of people being interested in breaking afterwards has been really great. And yeah, I mean, to your point, like there's only so much of the community and like the authenticity you can really bring onto a big stage. If you really want to get into breaking and like hip hop, you have to go to a local event where it's like in a club and the lights are dim and the floor is probably really gross and it's really crowded and probably a little smelly and hot and humid. And then it's like, well, that's the vibe. At the Olympics, you can't really recreate that. And honestly,
Hi there. This is Laura Mahoney from Lux Neuro, Neurofeedback and Counseling. We are bringing you stories of transformation each podcast. Imagine how we can transform your life. Insomnia. I had not been sleeping well for months. My energy level was low. Small tasks felt incredibly challenging. Lack of quality of sleep was obviously impacting my relationships, my ability to be the mom I wanted to be, and my ability to concentrate at work. I didn't feel like myself at all. At that time, I was in talk therapy, and it really didn't seem to be doing much for me. Fortunately, I found neurofeedback, specifically Laura Mahoney, and after a few sessions, I started to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I started sleeping better, and life felt more enjoyable. I began feeling like my energetic self again. I am almost at the end of my neurofeedback protocol, and I am so grateful for Lux Neuro as they have literally changed my life. While neurofeedback is quite an investment of time and money, it has been well worth it. Thank you, Lex Nero and Laura Mahoney. You've changed my life.
I wouldn't want everyone to experience that as their first breaking experience, because you're definitely at risk of potentially getting hit by like a flying foot or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, the fact that they played some of the real music that we actually listened to, the fact that they allowed people to kind of sit around the floor, because that's a big thing for us, is the energy and having people up close and there. Like, I could hear my boyfriend, and I know a lot of people saw him, but I could hear him yelling for me. You know, he was there, but that's how it is at a jam. He's standing right behind me. And so to have that energy still simulated in some sort of way was really nice, because then you're kind of bringing the community, and the people who were seated around the floor, they were breakers, or mostly breakers. And so they kind of knew what was going on and were like cheering for their friends and stuff like that. So I think, overall, they did a pretty good job of kind of bringing in different elements and making it feel as authentic as they could, in an Olympic setting.
Totally. I mean, you're an Olympian now. Like, this is unbelievable. Like, I mean, if you could have told your young self, it's not going to be gymnastics, but it's going to be breakdancing, like, how wild of a moment would that have been?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I was talking to my mom about this. Obviously didn't walk away with a medal, especially not gold. And she's like, young Sunny would not have known if you would have walked home with a medal or not. You went into your first day of gymnastics asking if you were going to get a gold medal. Yes. Like, she would have been happy with whatever. The fact that you just went to the Olympics would have been more than enough. And that kind of perspective, actually, it really helped in that moment. Because, there was a small part of me that was like, can I curse? But sorry. Anyways, dang,
Absolutely.
I wish I had... I wish I had taken home a medal, but when I look back on it, I wouldn't change anything. And I think I learned more from not winning that medal, and I took away so much more, because for the first time I was able to really let go of my performance and just be like, just have fun. But yeah, I mean, I'm an Olympian, and little Sunny and big Sunny is super happy about that.
Grown Sunny, that's in a dirty bar at her 30s doing her job. Like, let's go. It all comes through. That's incredible. How was it being around all the other athletes? Because you have like strong personalities, and like, they're on a mission. I mean, this is a vibe of a group of humans. Like, how was it like opening ceremonies and that whole situation?
Oh my gosh, opening ceremonies, it's, as everyone probably saw, it was pouring. We're on these boats, and like, parts of me was like, oh my God, I'm miserable. And then other parts were like, but this is so epic. It added to like the epicness of the event. Riding at the helm of this boat with LeBron and Coco up there with this flag, like, it was like they were leading us into battle. Rain pouring down, it's gray everywhere. It was super epic. All of the basketball players were kind of in the front of the boat with us, as well as some others, but they were super tall, kind of seeing them up like it in real life, and also kind of seeing the differences in our bodies and everything. That was really cool. And then spending a lot of time in like the high performance center, the Team USA specific house, and seeing all the athletes there, and just seeing the focus and the dedication. You really feel this energy, like everyone's dialed in and ready. It was just really cool to be around everyone. But I think what struck me most really is the difference in how, like, there's such a vast range of body types. And, mentally I knew this, but being there, it's like, there's no one way that you have to look to be an athlete, to be healthy. And I thought that was actually really cool. And it always struck me, seeing these different athletes and just be like, I wonder what their sport is. You see these like really husky, huge men, and I'm like, I wonder what your sport. And then you see like the really, really tiny people, and then you see us breakers. I mean, I'm pretty small, wearing super baggy clothes, so you have no idea what's underneath there. It was really fun.
Yeah. What's so cool what a beautiful metaphor for this world of everybody looking and being so different, but this like-minded mindset and core value of competing and showing up to just not only compete amongst other people, but to test yourself on this worldwide stage. Like, this is a very elite group of humans that are wildly diverse in so many capacities. And I mean, internationally, like, it's different languages, different beliefs, and, Ukraine athletes that were lost due to the war. I mean, there was so many heavy undertones undertones that were going on. It was really beautiful, I think, particularly this year, to see our athletes and all these humans that had this like-minded goal united on one front to compete. And and to be in the mix of it had to be just, an incredible, like, tangible energy that just some piece of that has to stick with you.
Yeah, for sure. This is not an experience I'm ever going to forget.
So there you go. And I think it's really like just the beginning. And I think it's so serendipitous that you know the business side. And we're going to jump into that piece right now. So if you're listening, Sunny's going to give us a breakdown on how all these formal business skills are leading her into building her own name, brand, and likeness. I know some of my very humble humans don't love considering themselves a brand and that kind of thing. But in this day and age, you can do that and you can live and chase the dream. And even in any corporate setting in the world, it's not like going to the Olympics. It's not like chasing, your heart space and chasing that pull from the back of your back to lean in. So listen to the second part. We're going to jump off and then we'll come back in. Sunny, we'll be right back.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.